we have to approach all conversations around policing and public safety to to be about increasing transparency within this police department. And I think it is about like I think so much of the lack of that transparency comes from this place of having a police department that is only accountable to one person.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
This is the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. My co-host today is Jason Garcia, and we are joined by Ward 10 Council Member Aisha Chugtai. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Since last we had an episode, we had the Minneapolis police kill Amir Locke in a no-knock warrant, no-knock warrants have become a topic of conversation. The mayor's saying he banned it during the campaign, not actually banning it. Do you have an assessment of the job the mayor is doing? How has this happened again? I guess is the question.
I mean, this has happened again because we exist under a system of policing that isn't working for our community because we have no transparency or accountability of the Minneapolis Police Department, because we continue to prioritize the comfort and illusion of safety for some over the lives of others. It's happened again, and it just keeps happening.
And in this case, we can't normally draw such a straight line between a policy decision or lack of action from the mayor directly to the police killing. Are you willing to offer an assessment of how the mayor has done his job? I know Robin Wansley Warlebaugh, the Ward 2 council member, called for his resignation at the council meeting. What's your assessment?
I mean, the mayor has always had full authority and control over the Minneapolis Police Department, not just this mayor, but every single one before him. And, we have right now a mayor that not only has that authority, but has authority over all departments within our city. And, to see a continued lack of leadership over, taking responsibility for the police department's actions, over, meaningful policy that builds some type of trust, some type of transparency, some type of accountability, over the police department. That's entirely on him. And I think it's really unfortunate that, in the week and a half since the murder of Amir Locke, we've had mass demonstrations every single day since this happened. We've had multiple demonstrations here in City Hall. We had high school students from North High come earlier this week. The family of Amir Locke has come to City Hall directly a couple of times, and everyone is very clear about the demands that they have. Right, it is 5 fire the police officers involved, ask for the resignation of the interim chief of police, set the record straight about who Amir Locke was, and apologize for calling him a suspect when he wasn't one. And those aren't impossible things to do. And I think it's really incredibly unfortunate that we haven't seen those demands met. And beyond that, I think it's really unfortunate that that Amir's family that has somehow found a way to come to this institution that took their son's life in such a violent and unjust way, that they have come here multiple times and have, instead of being met with like some type of regret from this institution or some type of apology or care, that they have each time been met with, silence and locked doors. And I don't know. I think that speaks a lot to it. Just speaks a lot to the entire situation.
What feels especially wrong to me is it doesn't feel like we've come very far since the summer of 2020.
We haven't.
We had the police press release calling him a suspect, which echoes back to saying that George Floyd died of medical distress. Police are lying in their press releases about killing people and who they were. It doesn't feel like we've come very far.
No, it doesn't feel like we've come very far because we haven't come very far.
Right. I think that, one of the most difficult parts of last year was navigating the post George Floyd trauma of the city while simultaneously going through a very contested election. And there's an old saying in writing about the illusion of change and how you manipulate the illusion of change, particularly in media like comic books, to keep things the same but to keep people interested. And it feels like Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, spent an entire year manipulating people and playing with that illusion of change, stating that he had banned no-knock warrants. And that's not just something that other agencies said. He said that at a public campaign event that I was at in Morris Park. He said those words, and he defended it when people pointed out that it wasn't really a ban. And it leaves us in this situation where we are a divided city, and everybody talks about how we have to have trust in one another and move forward together. But the cynicism of that campaign and the allies of Jacob Frey's that really pushed the police narrative last year, I think, have done a lot to divide us. And when you meet with your fellow city council members, there are a lot of new council members. How do you talk to each other about healing that and bringing people back together and trying to, work around that very cynical approach that dominated last year's campaign?
Yeah, I would describe that as cynical. I mean, it's also, a few things. So I would say, like, John, I know you tweeted about it, but I don't know, like, if other people saw it. So we'll start here. So last week or earlier this week, oh my God, that was on Monday, the City Council's Policy and Government Oversight Committee, which is chaired by Councilmember Ellison, hosted this event or hosted a discussion on the no-knock warrant policy. Councilmember Ellison, pulled together a really powerful group of stakeholders, and invited all of us to come to committee and ask questions and get to kind of really understand what what these experts were talking about. So, we had people come in who really taught us a lot about the nature of no-knock warrants, their history in this country, their history in this city, and the city's existing policy, and what we should really, be aiming for, what the mayor should be aiming for as he rewrites this policy. Big deal, and it's all of it really sucks, right? Because what we're coming down to is in this moment, the city council doesn't have authority to do the things that we know we need the most, right? We don't have the authority to fire this officer. We don't have the authority to ask for the resignation of the chief of police. There's a very limited scope of what we can do here, aside from, spam the mayor's phone every day and ask him what he's doing. And that's not working. So, and the mayor, I think it was a big deal that he came to committee and asked or answered some questions. And I think it was there are a couple of things of note for me personally, I think, that came out of Monday. The first being, for the very first time, the mayor admitting on the public record that I think he described it as I misled people, or I misused words. I can't remember exactly what his language was, but an admission of the fact that last year, what he called a no-knock a no-knock warrant ban was not actually one. And that's a really big deal. He doesn't have a tendency of admitting when he is wrong about something. And then, I think the second big thing to note for me was that in that committee, I think all 13 council members, or at least most of us, attended. And everybody asked questions. Everybody expressed frustration. Everybody asked really direct questions of the mayor, that came from a place of deep frustration with him, and kind of watching it happen in that moment. I think it was really surprising to have some of our, more members of our more conservative wing of the council, or people who campaigned alongside the mayor in the election cycle, asking him some of the toughest questions. So I think that really speaks to where the council is at right now, right? Which is, we're the ones who hear from our constituents every day about what's going on. We're the ones who are watching what's happening outside. We're the ones, walking downstairs every single day to the rotunda to see, yet another group of people come in and express their frustration, oftentimes kids, coming in and saying they want us to take action, and yet no action is being taken. So I think it generally, speaks not only to the state of the council, but I think that also it's how Minneapolis residents feel. It's how, yeah.
I remember the political atmosphere in 2020 after George Floyd was killed on the city council, and it felt like everyone was taking it seriously. It felt like there's unanimity here. Something is going to happen, and that kind of faded away. But to transition to Elliott Payne's proposal for a new charter amendment, creating a public safety department. He says it's not a rehash of last year's election and the debate there. I know he doesn't have any detailed proposals there. He wants unanimity. He wants to bring the mayor along on it. But do you have any preferences for where you'd like to see it go?
I think this is a really good time for us to bring into. I am excited that this is something that Councilmember Payne is taking on. I think it's a good thing. I know he's been in very regular communication with the mayor's office and with other council members about it. I think that, I don't know, my approach to all of it is we have to approach all conversations around policing and public safety to be about increasing transparency within this police department. And I think it is about like, I think so much of the lack of that transparency comes from this place of having a police department that is only accountable to one person, and I think that's what we have to be looking at. And I think we have to, I think that's like one of the big things we have to be looking at is how do we like democratize our systems of public safety? How do we help people? How do we fund the critical services that people need that actually help keep people safe? How do we fight these more and more bloated police department budgets? How do we fight for justice for families who keep losing their loved ones? How do we center the fact that at the core of all of it, right? Like it isn't like these are not. It's like there's a person who lost their life and a family that lost their loved one. Like that's at the center of all of it, and we have to hold on to that and uplift that.
One of the things that has really struck me about this, to compare it to the summer of 2020, was how quickly people on the conservative side of not just city council but also the mayor and the police chief made the issue about the word defund. And right now it feels like there is all of this scrutiny and observance and pressure on the concept of no-knock warrants, rather than addressing this holistically as something that resulted as a series of problems. Like you said, the lack of accountability, the lack of visibility, especially because Jacob Frey uses those words so frequently, while demonstrating absolutely none, in my opinion. But also, it also ties into the poverty in our communities. It ties into racism in our, not just in our police department, but certainly blatantly in our police
Everywhere.
department.
Yeah.
And there are all these things that it feels like, it's very easy to focus on one thing and nitpick at the meaning of a no-knock warrant ban or a no-knock warrant moratorium or things like that. And I feel like what Jacob has tried to do over the past week is really, talk about his policy around no-knock warrants and the moratorium, and how DeRay McKesson is here to help consult with that and things like that. And none of that's certainly a valid thing to look at. I think 99.9% of communities in the country need to evaluate no-knock warrants. But I think that to just focus on one thing does such a disservice to the community. And, I know Kate Knuth had tweeted out a list of reforms that she thought Jacob should make. I know that you, as now the quote unquote legislative body in Minneapolis, have a very limited purview of those things, but have there been specific policies outside of no-knock warrants that city council has been discussing, or that you would like to see brought up? Or, if you had a one-on-one with Jacob Frey, what would you tell him needs to change?
I think that we need like a full moratorium on no knock warrants, period. I think we need to, even go, looking back at the last 2 years, it's like we need to have a police department that is banned fully, period, from using chemical weapon, chemical weapons and sonic weapons on its residents ever. We need to, ban the use of, or like the purchasing of military weapons and warrior style training. And we need to demilitarize our police department, and we need a police union contract that isn't continuing to allow the police department to, hold the city of Minneapolis and its residents hostage, more or less. And ultimately, like, we need a police department that isn't run by like one executive, like policing and safety. It's a thing that is like, so, I don't know. It's like, it has always been and will always be like the work of going about achieving safety and the enforcement of that. It's like, it's always going to be violent, and it is always going to be something that protects the wealthy and protects property, so long as it is set up in this way, so long as it's set up in this, and so long as it's about enforcement, and it's not about like safety, which is like the way in which we relate to each other, the way in which we relate to a community, the freedom that we have to move from place to place, and the freedom that we have to interact with one another in the ways in which we choose, right? That's what safety is. And like, that has to come from the people, that has to be controlled by people, that has to be close to, that has to be democratized. And this way of doing it is not working. It's not working in anywhere. And I don't know. I so many times in the last 2 weeks, I have gone back to the fact that like, it is like our young people that are like dying of police violence, of gun violence, of like, and like, as a society, we are continuing to fail them in every possible way we possibly can, and this is the end result of it, right?
Yeah. I was alarmed to read that the interim chief, Amelia Huffman, had promoted a training director who had previously been fired for misconduct, and there were a couple of other promotions she had made where basically these were controversial promotions, you would say, and they were left off of a public announcement. It does. I know you said, I think you said earlier that you believe Huffman should resign, or the mayor should call for a resignation. I assume you're not going to, if she's nominated as the next permanent chief, you wouldn't vote for her.
I continue to be reassured that that she was always intended to be an interim, but I don't know. I have no intention of voting for her to be the chief of police. Everything we've seen so far leads me to believe that, like, at every level of leadership, we have a complete failure,
right,
around this department.
I have one final question.
Yeah.
It's about, so I watched you at a neighborhood association meeting a couple of weeks ago. It was in the Wedge neighborhood, and I tweeted about it and said that you had given like a very gracious, politically correct answer to the question, like, what are you doing about crime and public safety? And you said you met with the inspector. It's like the standard council member answer. And it strikes me that the people who asked this kind of question probably voted for the strong mayor charter amendment, probably voted against question 2, and maybe still don't understand that the council doesn't have policy control over the police. That's the mayor's job, as you've said before. At a certain point, like, how much do you keep giving the politically correct, gracious, I'm taking responsibility answer, or when do you decide I'm going to start explaining to people that this is the mayor's job?
I saw your tweets about it. I don't know. I think what struck me, I don't think it's an unfair question to ask of your council member, and
I mean, you're the one showing up.
I am the one that's showing up. And I,
Yeah.
you know, and I like, I am doing everything I can. I have been doing everything I can. And like, in a moment when people kind of regardless of the spectrum of like political ideology that they're on, at a time when people are like genuinely frustrated and genuinely scared and like genuinely alarmed by what they're experiencing, right? Or what they're watching, or the way in which it's the way in which the story is told in public, right? Like the answer to what are you going to do about that isn't, I don't know, it's not my problem. It's, here are the things I'm doing, right? Like here's my small part in all of that. I don't think it's I don't know, I don't think it's appropriate to answer someone's question whether it was asked in good faith or not. I don't know that. With, I don't know, that's not my problem, right? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
actually, I believe that it's all of our problem. It should be all of our problem, because that's like the core of my argument. The core of my argument is that safety is not attached to an armed police force. It's that like our safety is bound with one another. It's about how we show up for one another. It's about the systems that we create that center care and not violence, right? Like, I don't know. I thought I get asked pretty out of pocket questions about crime and safety all of the time, and about everything all of the time, you know? And it's not actually people's, I don't know. I think it's fair to ask those questions. I think it's like, it's not people's job to, and I actually like, I don't know how much like this person engaged with the election cycle, probably a lot, but like, I'm not here to make that judgment, and I'm not here to answer questions based on how much a person knows or who they voted for. Like, it's not people's job to know what each body of government does. It's my job to fight for the very best conditions for the people that I make decisions on behalf of.
Jason, do you have one last quick question before we let Aisha go get some rest after a long week?
I do actually. And I guess this is on my way home today from work. I went past, I believe it was about 40th and Lindale, and there was a group of what looked like middle school students holding Black Lives Matter signs and waving at the traffic going past on Lindale. And you mentioned earlier how so much of this unfairly falls to the youth. And I have a child who is going to turn 22 in 2 months. The age that Amir Locke was murdered at, and that's something that really struck me. Is I'm a parent of a person that age, and to imagine their life being taken away, I think that unfortunately your generational cohort, certainly much closer to my child's age than mine, have had to deal with, for certainly going back to Trayvon Martin, almost a decade ago, if not before. What do you say to the youth, not necessarily even people your age, but like those 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds that have been out in the street protesting and who see how much this is impacting their generation? What do you say to them to let them know that you're with them too?
I'm so sorry. Like, I feel like I've seen a lot of takes on the internet about, whose dog is that?
Mine.
That's Jason's.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Hi from me. Yeah, I feel like I've seen like a lot of takes online, not just like in the last few days, but in the last few years, right? Like maybe since Sandy Hook, I don't know. Just about like how like the youth are going to save us, and like our kids these days, they're so strong and they have so much clarity, and all of these things that I believe are actually like intended to be that are intended to be like compliments to like our youth and our young people. And I just think that we should be so ashamed of ourselves. We should be so ashamed of ourselves as adults in this situation that like our children, like literal children, are having to do this instead of be kids, right? Like that they're having to plead for their lives and plead for the planet and plead for like their humanity and the humanity of the people that they like know and love and care about instead of being kids. You know, I just like we had high schoolers here earlier this week, and like each of them that got up and like shared a little bit, like talked about like how they saw themselves and their brothers and their fathers in Amir, you know, in Amir Locke, and like that they wanted the city leadership to do better and to do something. And I just think it's just so broken. It's just so broken and so messed up when our kids are like having to fight for a better world instead of be kids. I'm so sorry that is the case. That's what I would say to any like young person.
Ward 10 Councilmember Aisha Chugtai, thank you for joining us.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.